You're listening to the Nature Talks podcast, a podcast about education and connecting learners of all ages with the outdoors and nature. My name is Kevin O'Shea and I'm your host. I'm an early years educator with a passion for connecting kids and adults with the outdoors. I'm a passionate naturalist who spends as much time as I can exploring nature, learning about plants, birds, and bugs, and then sharing my amazing experiences with others. In each episode of the Nature Talks podcast, we'll have conversations with people making education connections with students and nature. More than any other time in history, we need to be sparking a passion for conservation and sustainability with the young and old alike. And in this podcast, we'll talk to educators, students, scientists, and citizens making a difference in the world today. Sit back and get ready to learn something new and exciting about nature education. Well, hey there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Nature Talks podcast. It's Kevin here again, and this week we've got a fascinating talk with the primary principal of the International School of Phnom Penh in Cambodia, Liz Ford. She stopped by the podcast to tell us all about the amazing projects that are going on at ISPP, and it's a pretty great interview, and she talks about some pretty amazing things that are happening down there in Phnom Penh. So sit back, get ready for a fantastic interview, and learn about a school that's doing some really incredible things to be sustainable and practice conservation. All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Nature Talks podcast. And in this episode, I'm very fortunate to have with us guest Liz Ford of the International School of Phnom Penh. Liz, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel really honored.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We're a new podcast, but we've got some great things we've done so far and we're going to do in the future. And I'm really happy that you've taken the time to stop by the podcast and tell us about some of the amazing things that are happening at the International School of Phnom Penh. But before we jump into that, I was wondering if you could just take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your current context in education.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm Liz. I am currently in Cambodia, obviously, Phnom Penh, beautiful country, beautiful city, originally from England. I grew up in the countryside. My family are all avid gardeners. You know, family meals would often be sharing, discussions about, oh, I've got a cutting of this. How's your cutting? Everyone in my family is a gardener, and I feel a little bit of a fraud because I'm probably the only member who's not a gardener, and here I am talking to you. But we grew up eating our own vegetables, and most of my family continue to live that kind of life. My brother is actually totally self-sufficient, but that's a story for another podcast. I've lived overseas in education longer than I ever lived in the UK, so I've lived all around the world. My children have never lived in the UK. They now both live in Europe, one in Portugal, one in the UK. But I have always been passionate about environmental education. And so here in Cambodia, in our school, we're kind of like a little pocket of greenness in a very dry, dusty city that's beautiful, but very much lacks greenery. The countryside outside of Phnom Penh city is beautiful and very, very green. It's a city that, as you probably know, there was a horrific, there was a war which was only 40 years ago, and pretty much most of the city was destroyed. It's building back up again, but the city planning has not really been very strategic. I am seeing quite a bit more green parks emerging and places for children to play. Mm-hmm. But anyway, Phnom Penh, dry, dusty city, beautiful nonetheless. And ISPP, our school, is I would say it's a little oasis of greenness. Okay. Most of the action that's taken place in the school has been student-driven. So, there's been some very passionate educators, but it comes from the children. Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that I want to get into later, which seems to be a theme, not just in podcast episodes, but just when I have conversations with my own colleagues and friends who are passionate about environmental education, is often about who drives these different things and who can we lead to drive them, especially with in the context of international education, obviously, it can sometimes be a bit of a revolving door when it comes to faculty. I myself have been in Asia. This is my 20th year. Coming up in just a few weeks, I'll have my 20th anniversary of coming to Asia to teach. And, I've been at some schools for a fairly long time, but others not so long. But yeah, I was wondering, to backtrack a little bit about ISPP, International School of Phnom Penh. Could you tell us a little bit about your school? I have to admit, I am familiar with, of course, a little bit about the, I'll say cursory knowledge of the history of Cambodia, and the kind of trials and tribulations it's gone through as a country. But I'm sure most people, well, I have to admit, I am pretty ignorant about Cambodia and Phnom Penh itself. So can you tell us a little bit about the school? How long has it been in Phnom Penh? Roughly, kind of like the student-based population, how many people are there, that kind of thing.
The school's actually been in existence for about 32 years, 33. We had our 30th anniversary a couple of years ago. Let's say 33 years. It started off with sort of like 10 children whose parents worked for the UN, NGOs. And we now have 900, the exact amount, around 950 students from 3 years to 18. It's a 3-program IB school. There's a number of international schools in Phnom Penh, but we are the most international in terms of our student body. We have about 52 nationalities, and we have a cap, so we can't have any more than 30% of any one nationality.
Oh, really? Okay.
So that keeps the international mix going. Our faculty is pretty diverse as well. We moved to this new campus. So the original school was a lot of old villas in the center of the city. And we've got this amazing and beautiful new campus now, which is just on the outside of the city. Okay. Although, to give you perspective, I live bang in the center and it takes me 10 minutes to get here. Oh, okay. It's not a very big city. Oh, okay. And what else is there? Yeah, it's like I said before, it's very much a green oasis here. It's beautiful. I wish I could actually take you outside for a walk around. It's beautiful. And we do have a lot of students who are passionate about the environment. And so we're very fortunate.
Great. Well, okay. Well, that leads us right into, what I'm curious about. I mean, there seems to be a lot of great sustainability initiatives going on at your school, and you said student driven. So tell the Nature Talks podcast listeners a little bit about the wonderful things that are happening at ISPP.
So I would say originally a lot of the action came from the students. Elementary students often a little bit more, myopic in, they don't see the big picture. It's like, this is wrong, so we must change it. So they took a few initiatives as a result of action from some of their units of inquiry. We're a PYP school. And it ended up, some of them, like banning plastic, it got to the board level, the Board of Governors. And now environmental action looking after our environment is one of the pillars of our strategic plan. So the sustainability of it is embedded in the fact that it is something we have to do as a school, right? So that helps us. We are officially an eco school. We got our green flag a couple of years ago. We're up for renewal at the moment. I'd say it's been a journey because we have to change some people's, not just their behaviors, but they have to believe that what they're doing can make a difference. So I think the first thing that we did that was huge is we are a single-use plastic-free campus, which sounds like a huge mouthful. But yeah, we have big signs by the gate, single-use plastic-free campus, huge mouthful. That has taken a little bit of a step back, I will be completely honest, because of COVID. Okay. But there's certain things that we've accepted we can't change right now, such as disposable masks. We have many families and teachers who believe that they need to wear one of the disposable masks, which our environmental committee are not so happy about. But we're not going to, we're not going to force everyone to wear a cloth mask. Absolutely not. Yeah. So what we did is there's an organization here in Cambodia called Plastic Free Cambodia, and they came and they trained all our Cambodian staff, such as the teaching assistants, the people who work in the office, security, groundsmen, gardeners. And it was a 2-day training about the impact of plastic on our planet. Okay. And that completely changed the way, everyone was coming in with their polystyrene boxes from the food stalls outside. Now, that had a huge impact. One thing that we were very naive about, and I feel kind of ashamed about the assumption that we made, is that we felt that the teachers, the educators, did not need this training because they already all knew. So that was very stupid on my part. So we actually still had some teachers who were not buying into this. We banned the coffee shop. We have a coffee shop here, a little cafe. They were not allowed to sell coffee in plastic cups. Everyone had to bring their own. We started off with a reward card system, did not work. And so then one of the children had this great, not idea, but they pointed out that smoking wasn't banned. Smoking ended up having to be banned. And if you can't do it, you can't do it. So let's just ban it. And so we did. We, unless you bought your own cup to the coffee shop, you couldn't get a coffee. And we bought some, we sold some. So anyone who'd forgotten it could just buy a cheap coffee cup. And some people continued to leave them around the campus. So they were swept up, taken back to the coffee shop. So it became a money maker as well. So that was one of our big things.
Well, that's fantastic. I think it's interesting to hear your perspective about how you were, you claim to be naive and thinking that the teachers, the faculty, the international faculty who I'm assuming, like with a lot of international schools, have been around the world. They've been through life. They know things. They've in many ways, a lot of us international educators have experienced a lot of things that maybe our counterparts back home might not, because of that kind of international perspective. But I know from my own experience, not something as grand as a plastic-free campus, but I've been surprised over the years at the pushback and often apathy from colleagues when it comes to putting forward or trying to put forward environmental initiatives, and it's quite shocking. Sometimes you have people who pay lip service to things. They talk about it. They have a unit of inquiry sharing the plant with their class, and they're like, "Look at this, we can do this and that." And then when that's done, they just kind of walk away and wipe their hands. But yeah, okay. So that's fantastic. I think a lot of us have a lot to learn from that initiative. Now, you also mentioned to me when we were kind of having a bit of a back and forth on Twitter about, and I read a little bit about it on your website, about this kitchen garden, and there's bees. And I mean, I'm a beekeeper, so I hear that, I'm like, whoa, tell me about your bees. And I was wondering if you could let me know a little bit about the kind of gardening initiatives and whatnot that go on.
All right. So I can talk to you first about the garden, and I really think that I need to connect you with Amy and Neri because they are passionate gardeners. So we've had a little garden space which was created a few years ago by one of our teachers who was also a passionate gardener. And in relation to your comment about, the sustainability of these things, he moved on. He had a compost going, he had the garden going, he created a little sort of sitting area. We called it the contemplative garden, and it was just beautiful. He left, it kind of went a bit. Yeah. So we now have another teacher, and she has gardening club during the week, during recess. She was a bit overwhelmed. She's had to have meetings with our gardeners. So it's very important that the gardening club meets with our school gardeners, the maintenance guys, so that they know what we're doing. Otherwise, they come along and they sort of just chop everything down. And that has happened before. And there's also an after-school gardening club, but they work very closely together because it's a different person. The most important thing that we have, human resource, is that Amy, who runs the garden, is a very keen and knowledgeable gardener. She's British. One of the TAs, coincidentally also in kindergarten, who is from Cambodia, is also just, I mean, I don't know if you can say someone is a gifted gardener, but she is a gifted. It's almost like she touches it, it will flourish.
Wow.
And she's from Cambodia. So she really understands the soil, understands the climate, understands what will and will not work here. Yeah. So the two of them together have created this amazing little garden.
That's fantastic.
The last 2 years have been a little bit sad because obviously we've been online for most of it. There was drama in the garden yesterday, actually. They had a lot of tomatoes that had come out ready to ripen. And we discovered that someone had picked all the tomatoes.
Oh no! Oh no!
So there was drama in the garden yesterday.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful garden. It has lots of herbs. Mm-hmm. It has at the moment tomatoes. I think it has like little mini aubergines. It has okra growing. And we have a papaya tree and a mango tree and a few other fruit trees there. Like I say, I have to connect you with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Please do that. And I'll get them on another episode of this podcast to talk about, because it's really interesting. One of the things that I kind of alluded to in some questions I sent you was that whole, and you've answered that. But when you're coming from another country, another climate, and you're trying to garden somewhere, I've learned the hard way here. Now I'm in Shenzhen, which is subtropical, not quite as hot as Phnom Penh, but it's a pretty hot place. It's, right across, I mean, I can see Hong Kong territory from my, bedroom window. So we're there, but I mean, I spent the last 10 years before that in like northern Japan, gardening, which is similar to Canada where I'm from. So I'm confident with my abilities in that climate. And then I moved here and it's just like, I kill everything. And then there's all this stuff all these things that kill everything I plant, pests and bugs I've never seen of and heard of. And I spend so much time schooling myself now, trying to learn like what's happening here and what do I do about this? And I have to admit that after, 3 years now in Shenzhen, I'm still fumbling in the dark with gardening, but I keep going. I keep going.
You need a Neri.
Yeah, exactly. Amazing. And that's one thing I don't have, because we've got some fantastic, wonderful local, Chinese teaching assistants and whatnot, but none of them know anything about gardening. They're the ones that I work with. They just make a lot of jokes about how they're going to, and ironically enough, they're going to steal my vegetables. But none have. And I've just harvested a beautiful, I've got some beautiful cucumbers here.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So we actually have a kitchen here. We have a learning kitchen. And the idea is that the children can actually harvest themselves and then go to the kitchen and, use the herbs, the tomatoes, the vegetables. But so honestly, it was like drama, big alert. Someone stolen my tomatoes. It was very upsetting yesterday.
Yeah.
But what they also have done, Amy and Neri, which is amazing, is they have ordered plants that will attract certain bugs and insects. So we have a butterfly garden and it's beautiful and it's full of butterflies and lots of plants that keep the butterflies happy. However, we've noticed some of the children will see a butterfly outside and they'll say, "Oh, Miss Liz, the butterfly's escaped." We're like, butterflies should actually be living outside of a butterfly garden. So Amy and Neri have ordered quite a few plants to be put all around the school and trees that will attract certain bugs and certain birds. Yeah. And they're both avid bird experts as well. So you definitely need a meeting with them.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a birder as well. I'm just a general nature nerd. So we nature nerds need to unite and talk and share our nature nerd knowledge. So I mean, with regards to those different learning spaces, the butterfly garden, the kitchen garden, these places, how do this is something I'm coming with off the cuff, but like as the different like year level teams at your school. I mean, I've worked in PYP schools most of my career. I am at the moment. So if it is a Sharing the Planet unit of inquiry or other units, how are teachers encouraged to use those spaces? With those gardeners you've mentioned, do they do work with different teachers in different year levels and kind of guide them and help them?
Absolutely. That's a really good question. So what they do is the teachers, the gardener teacher will send an email out at the beginning of the year and just say, which units will you want the garden?
Okay.
And I know when we did the POI review last year, it was deliberately moved a couple of units so that they could use the garden at different times.
Okay, yeah.
Everyone wanted the garden at the same time. And so we do have some ongoing areas which are year long, like the herbs. But then if the children with their unit want to use it during that time, they need it at that time. So, yeah, it's actually quite a nice rotation.
Wonderful. That's so cool. I recently had the opportunity, making lemonade out of lemons, I suppose. In the city of Shenzhen here, all kindergartens in the city were shut down because of COVID restrictions. So our year level kindergarten was closed, and I'm a kindergarten teacher. So we were the only 4 teachers in the entire school of over 1,000 students doing online learning. And we were doing some synchronous and asynchronous, but and we were coming to work each day and doing it from school. But it did afford me the opportunity to have a bit more of a free schedule than I normally would. So I was able to, the grade 3 year level reached out to me, and I was able to do guided nature walks and birding tours of our campus with the grade 3 classes. And that was really a fantastic experience. So I'm curious, with all these wonderful things that are happening at International School of Phnom Penh, what are some of the takeaways that you're hoping the kids who go to ISPP, if for example, if they're going to be rotated, their families are rotated out of Cambodia, what are some of the takeaways you're hoping they get from these experiences and these different opportunities you're providing?
I suppose the biggest takeaway, so I'm working the elementary, I'm the principal of the elementary school, so they're young. But if I'm thinking about our elementary students, rather, the biggest takeaway, I think, for them is that they understand that they can make a difference. I think it sometimes feels a little bit hopeless for young children. As I said before, they see something's wrong. And, an 8-year-old will say, well, if plastic's not good for the environment, let's just ban it. And of course, that's not how the world works. And so I would hope the biggest takeaway is that they know that they can make a difference. And I think that our children do feel that. They do have a voice in this school. So, yeah, I think that they know they can make a difference and that it's not just something that's isolated to ISPP, it's the world. Yeah. And that, they can carry on. They can carry on in their next school.
Yeah. That's one of the beautiful things about, I suppose, students who are going to maybe continue on and the kind of IB path, whether I know like my own children, for example, we were at one IB school and now here I am at Sheku International. They're at another IB school, and in time, we will move on to somewhere else. And, I hope that they also take away those valuable lessons from Sharing the Planet and how the world works and all of those wonderful things. So I want to we'll wrap things up here. I want to thank you for taking the time to share with me and the listeners a bit about the wonderful things that are happening at the International School of Phnom Penh. And I'm going to share links to your website on my Facebook page for this podcast and in the show notes of the podcast. If anyone wanted to reach out to you, I know, for example, I met up with you on Twitter. How can they connect? Twitter's always a good way. Yeah. And also, if they ask you, you can share my email. That's no problem. But I will definitely connect you with Amy and Neri. Yeah,
so as I said, I feel a bit of a fraud talking about gardening when my family would laugh because they are all gardeners and there's me. Not really. Yes, and they can also talk to you about the beekeeping, and we might need your help because our queen bee, the last 2 queens have died. So we need some help with our bees.
Those are
so
tricky ladies. I'm sure if it's what do they call the Asian honeybee? I'm still learning. Apis cerana, the Asian honeybees. Those queens can be tricky. They sometimes we've had a few escape. They just go.
Yeah.
And where do they go?
It was really sad. So we got some honey the first year.
Yeah.
And then during COVID, I mean, we have a beekeeper who he looks after our bees and our butterflies. Mm-hmm. And the queen went and they all went. So we probably need some help from you.
Well, I can talk to my my colleague Chet, who was in episode 3 of this podcast. He's kind of my beekeeping mentor as I'm going on my journey. But we'll see what we can do. And so again, Liz, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, again, I want to thank Liz for taking time to stop by the Nature Talks podcast. You heard where you can follow her, and I will put those links in the show notes, of course, for the Nature Talks podcast. For me, Kevin, of course, you can find me on Twitter at @MadForMaple. I'm there a lot. I've got a pretty big Twitter I don't want to say presence. I just spent a lot of time on Twitter, but you can come on over there and follow me and join the conversation about environmental education. Of course, you can find me on Instagram at Shizen Wildlife. Shizen Wildlife. Shizen is the Japanese word for nature, so nature wildlife. And of course, please come on over and join the Nature Talks Facebook group. It's a closed group. You find us, you click on the link in the show notes, and I will let you in, and you can join the conversation again about environmental education. So for all of you out there, no matter where you are in the world, thank you so much for taking the time to stop by the podcast. Please share us with your educator friends, your colleagues, people you know on your social medias and all of that stuff, and help us grow. And of course, in a place like Apple Podcasts or Google Play, wherever you find us, please leave us a very favorable rating and, of course, write a review. Well, that is it for another episode of the Nature Talks podcast. My name's Kevin, and no matter where you are, I hope you're happy, I hope you're healthy, and stay safe, everyone.